Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald! Timber!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Foul. I can't believe
Good time of day, everyone. Welcome to episode 135 of Americans Watching the Footy. 3 away from the spectacular already. Holy cow. Hadn't you thought that our spectacular was going to be a grand final preview? It's going to be earlier than that. Yeah, because I think we just added a couple episodes in the meantime was why. Or you just forgot how to do math. That's also quite possible. That's because we'd had a couple more bonuses because I'd done calculations before the season. But yeah, here we are. Benjamin and Ethan Castle in South San Francisco, California, with Brian Harambe the Footy Cat curled up on Ethan's bed and covering his face so as to say, "Don't fucking disturb me." If I could describe week 1 of finals in one word, schmoobly-dong, I would say underwhelming. There were close games, but really just the quality of play, the flow and everything just didn't live up to last year's finals, except for one of the games, and you might not guess which one I really felt that was. Well, the weather definitely did impact those first 2 contests Thursday and Friday night. Not to an extreme amount, there wasn't as much precipitation during the games themselves, but it looked more like wet weather footy at times, and the scoring kind of told that story as well. Now, as I've said, high scoring does not necessarily correlate with good. Low scoring doesn't necessarily correlate with bad, but it was just, these games seemed kind of sluggish at times, and the games that weren't so sluggish, there were just some incredibly one-sided stretches instead of, like some fun back and forth. Which game do you think was the most fun of this round? Let's see if we agree. I'm going to give it to the first 2.5 quarters of Game 4. Yeah, there you go. I fully agree. And I would say even when that game got less close and as the Lions pulled away, there was still some excitement to it. There were stretches of back and forth each way in that third quarter before Brisbane really delivered the finishing blow. And just the entertainment value, the pace of the game, the amount of action, that's what made it fun. Again, doesn't have to be that high scoring to be action-packed. Just going back and watching last year's first round of finals, I think that was the only game that can compare to the 4 we got. I mean, it's going to be hard for any year to compare to week 1 finals from last year for so many different reasons. But I'm just thinking, think about the Melbourne-Sydney game, one that wasn't necessarily down to the wire, but just a really fun back and forth game. Or the Bulldogs-Freo game, there was a good swing there. There was, the back and forth. That was probably the least exciting of the 4, and that one still left a lot to talk about. I just don't think this year's really quite lived up to that. I mean, the Sydney win was also an unexpected result, given a lot of the season as well, so there were a lot of things adding up to that. Honestly, even though one of the lower seeds won, I wouldn't say it was really an unexpected result, considering I saw them as favorites on the betting line, and I just saw them as favorites irrespective of that as well. Yeah, I'd agree. There weren't any, shocking results, but I think we do have a lot to talk about, so without further ado, Collingwood 96-60 defeating Melbourne 7-11-53. Let's just cut to it. Braden Maynard straight to the tribunal. Jacob Van Rooyen suspended 1 game, and I believe that's been accepted. I think the Van Rooyen 1 game is completely correct, because if he hadn't raised the elbow, it would have been nothing. It would have just been a normal collision going from the ball. Yeah, it would have been, some people say, a footy act. I like to say, taking after a terrible broadcaster who pulled out actually a very good phrase, ugly geometry. But no, once you raise the arm, you are liable there. Yeah, and that was completely unnecessary and avoidable, so I'm totally okay with it. The other thing is, I like that he got the suspension, even though Dan McStay wasn't actually concussed by it, that they punished the action regardless of the result. I imagine had he been concussed, it would have been a second game. Do you think it would have been 2 had he been concussed?
Yeah, which, I've said many times I'm not a fan of that approach.
When it comes to the Maynard and Brayshaw thing, I mean, the spoiling attempt did look somewhat realistic, but I think Maynard will still get punished for kind of turning in toward Brayshaw.
I like the idea that it's either going to be a 3-game suspension or like nothing.
This is another one where I think the action is more of an issue than the result. I mean, Brayshaw's concussion could have happened regardless of how the collision occurred, but it's a matter of what measures did Maynard take or what more could he have taken.
I mean, I guess maybe he could get 2 games. I think there's no way he gets a 1-game suspension. It's either
out till round 1 of next year.
Yeah. Or maybe even out till round 2 or nothing at all.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. So we're recording this Monday night Australian time, so it's going to be Tuesday evening that those decisions get handed down. You've got the Maynard Tribunal along with another from the Carlton-Sydney game, and we'll get to that in a bit.
As for the actual Collingwood-Melbourne action, Collingwood got up 26-6. They had a ton of forward time early, and then basically had none, and were kind of lucky to hold on.
Yeah, from the second through the fourth quarter, inside 50s were 56-22 in the Demons' favor, and yet they only outscored the Pies by 13. They kicked 6-11 from 56 entries, while Collingwood kicked 5-4 from 22. It was accuracy that doomed Melbourne. From the outset, it was an issue, kicking 7-11 with 8 misses, so 7 goals on 20 shots. You're not going to win a game like that. Bad kicking is bad footy. But thinking about the entries, it's not unheard of for Collingwood to manage to win a game despite that discrepancy. They ended up minus 32 for the game. But if you think about last year in round 21 when they faced off against the Ds, they won that despite being minus 22 inside 50s. It's a matter of efficient movement, using the speed they have, and more efficient shooting as well.
They've won a pretty fair amount of games when they haven't had more inside 50s. And I think when it's happened so frequently, it's a mix of getting lucky, as they did in this game, and being really good defensively and denying entries and forcing teams into lower quality shots. I think this game was also some of both. I thought it was really interesting. Melbourne did everything they could to get away from Isaac Quaino, which is smart.
But it came at the cost of some deeper entries, and then Nathan Murphy and Darcy Moore both lifted. I had said in our Finals Week 1 preview that the structure needs to be sound around more in terms of the tall defenders, and even without Billy Frampton back there, having Murphy there as an extra one-on-one, often taking the primary matchup, was a huge factor in this Collingwood win.
Nathan Murphy and Beau McCreary are 2 players that I think in a lot of systems would not be anywhere near as effective as they are at Collingwood. And again, my description of both of them, even though they're playing at opposite ends of the ground, is they make winning plays. And Nathan Murphy did a lot of that in this game. Also want to give some love to Mason Cox, even though Max Gawn ended up with 27 disposals. I thought Mason did a good job just making him earn them.
Yeah, he did well against Gawn early on in the ruck, made life for him difficult there, and got a vote of confidence as well when Darcy Cameron got subbed out. Now, some people are saying there may have been some concerns with Cameron's health throughout the week, but regardless, Mason stayed in, played the whole game in a win, and even though he didn't get a goal, we could say September Mason showed up.
He did a good job. Again, a lot of what you've got to do against Gawn is just stick with him, try to make his life difficult, make him earn his touches. You're probably not going to outplay him, and if you can just annoy him and make him work through something, you've done a good job.
You could tell also, though, that Gawn's ruck craft, when he actually gets the taps, is better. There were a few times in the second half where it was Tom Sparrow in particular running through stoppages and getting on the end of a couple of Mason's taps. He converted one of those into a goal, nearly did a second time. So just needs to be a bit more refined there, Mason, and we now really await who that is he's going to be going up against, whether that'll be Kieran Briggs or Scott Lysette. I would take Mason over Lysette right now, as crazy as that sounds.
I think Lysette's a mixed bag, and we'll get to that in a bit.
The other thing that frustrated me the most out of this game was Melbourne reverting to their old ways in terms of entries, just kicking long to packs and hoping it worked. I think Jake Melksham being out really messed up their forward structure and that they didn't have as reliable of a small mark. I was hoping for Cade Chandler to have a more prominent role there. Kazi Pickett didn't get as much of the ball. And when it came to the tall replacement, Tom McDonald, who could go back and forth, was on the slower side of things. So I'd say that would be an endorsement of Joel Smith spending some more time forward, backing in Michael Hibberd as he's near the end of his career. He announced that he'll be retiring at the end of the finals campaign. I believe they could get him to 200 games if they make the grand final.
Back to talking Melbourne's forward structure, Collingwood is not a team you want to try to bomb it into 50 against. They're good in contested marks. You want to do that against, like, Essendon. Frankly, this is a style that there aren't many teams that are going to play finals that you're going to be able to pull that off against, because if you make finals, you typically have a really good defense.
I imagine that Simon Goodwin will adjust that. I think, again, Chandler and Pickett are going to be really important in that structure. And with my doubts about Tom McDonald, I'm hoping for strategic and personal reasons that Ben Brown gets a crack at the semifinal. I guess the question now for Collingwood is what's going to happen when Nick Dacos comes back in? Who gets replaced? The general consensus among fans is Patrick Lipinski, though I put him at above average for this qualifying final. I thought he was really strong in terms of disposing the ball, may not have had huge numbers, was in the teens, but tended to be more effective than not. Maybe some of the concern was the lack of pressure that he applied, but it's going to be a hard time trying to figure out whether it's Lipinski going out, Oleg Markov, Tom Mitchell. I would say not take Lipinski out. It seems most likely, though. I mean, unless it's Markov. I think Lipinski would be left out rather than made the sub in favor of Jack Ginnivan.
I think Markov's the one that goes out.
That's what I was thinking as well. You were surprised that Markov was in the pecking order over John Noble. I was thinking all along that Markov was more there for providing some of the run that Nick Dacos can provide in the back half. As much as we like Markov, as exciting of a player as he can be, if I were on the selection committee, I would be saying that he'd be the one to miss out. And when it comes to the Demons for replacing Angus Brayshaw and Jacob Van Rooyen this week, well, Van Rooyen being out is another reason why I'd say bring in Ben Brown. Could be able to take some of that ruck pressure off of Gawn as well, and I'd rather have him in there than Tom McDonald. In terms of kind of covering for Brayshaw, though,
I think, a bigger game out of Jack Viney. He was limited to 20 disposals here. You return him to form, that probably covers a fair amount of your problems. He wasn't bad, but he was less than we've become accustomed to. I guess other than that, get more out of Ed Langdon, who was a little bit on the quiet side in this game. He had a couple of stretches where he was pretty prominent, and that was about it.
I would say James Harms will get a chance, but it looks like he actually got a hamstring injury and a scratch back, so that compounds their difficulties there. I think James Jordan probably gets another crack.
Yeah, that would make sense.
It's a really bad time for them to cop these sorts of injuries, but they've got to make the most of what they've got right now.
Jack Crisp led Collingwood with just 23 disposals. He had a goal, gained 500 meters. Steele Sidebottom with 22, Will Hoskin-Elliott with 20. Bobby Hill, 3 goals and a behind. He was the better of the small forwards in this game. Kazi Pickett couldn't kick straight. Probably conflicting for Mason to watch that. And Darcy Moore, 10 intercepts. Again, it was clear effort by Melbourne to stay away from Isaac Quaynor, but Moore and Murphy got theirs.
Clayton Oliver led the game with 31 disposals. He had 16 contested possessions, 11 clearances, and octopus at 742 meters gained. 16 possessions as well for Christian Petrarca in his 29 disposal performance. You have the two of them with lifting in contests and just Melbourne not being able to make good on their forward entry. So yeah, I guess maybe just a better game out of Viney and greater efficiency in front of goal, including from Bailey Fritsch, who was surprisingly poor after kicking 5 goals round 24 at his comeback. Maybe that'll be enough. You mentioned Gawn's big day. 31 hitouts, 27 disposals, 22 contested, 10 clearances and 7 marks. Jake Bowie with 19 disposals and 8 marks has looked like a more complete back half player in these past few weeks. Would still like him to be able to bulk up a bit more, not sure how much more he can fit onto his frame, but liking his play more as of late. Carlton, 14-8-74, defeating the Sydney Swans 9-14-68 in the first elimination final. This one started slowly, but once the Blues got out to their 29-point lead at halftime, we thought, All right, we might be able to shut the door on this one. Not the case, as the Swans woke up in the forward half.
Only thing is they had some trouble kicking straight. They had an acceptable, not great 4-3 showing in the third quarter, and then 2-5 in the fourth, and in the end it ended up being a really fitting tribute to the Crows team that many would argue should have had their final spot, where they had dominant stretches that they couldn't turn into goals.
Yeah, I believe it was in some of those 7 heartbreakers that the Crows had. They kicked 74 goals, 101 behinds. So yeah, that's very like the Crows there for the Swans to go out and do that, despite the forwards that they do have. And another year or two out of that crop of Joe Lombardi, Logan McDonald, Hayden McLean will serve them very, very well. This is a side that I think still can mature a bit more.
We'll talk about Sydney during the post-mortem segment in our semi-final preview, but the TLDR version that they made finals with everything that went wrong this year is impressive in its own right, whether or not they deserve to be there. And I wouldn't be concerned at all about the long-term success of this club. The question is going to be, and I get, after a while you start to ask, will they win a flag under John Longmire, which
Another flag, that is.
Yeah. I still think he's a very good coach. I wouldn't make any changes there.
It sounds like maybe he'll be out as part of a succession plan in 2 years. May involve their assistant and former Eagles premiership ruck Dean Cox. But tactically, I think they're sound. What I did like about the storyline of this game was that it involved 2 players who, really before this year, did not get enough respect for the roles that they had for the Blues. Of course, one of them is going to be fronting the tribunal on Tuesday, that being Jack Martin. He was suspended 2 games for careless conduct at high impact when he kind of went with a round arm and got to Nick Blakey's jaw. Again, Blakey was sent down for a head injury assessment there. That was pretty early on in this one, but Martin ended up going back in the end and securing a couple really important marks. He also kicked 2 goals. And at the very end, who was it that got that final intercept mark?
Nick Newman.
I have yet to hear anybody in an AFL commentary box this year use Hello Newman when he did something great. So I guess Seinfeld just doesn't have enough of a place in Australian culture. Also a great storyline that it was the former Swan to get that done too. He played 31 games for the Swans between 2017 and 2018, has now played 22 this year, and this may be the best season of his career. Career highs in a whole bunch of categories: disposals, tackles, more rebounds than ever. The most complete season that he's had. He's only ever had 5 Brownlow votes. I would not be surprised to see him equal, if not exceed that this year alone.
Also, Matthew Cottrell provides such a spark with some of the chaos plays in the forward 50, even though you'll also see him drop into some midfield stuff.
And in the back 50 at times as well. Did we see him take a few kick-ins this year even?
I think so.
Which is kind of weird when you have someone like Adam Saad, who did not take our advice and test the storage of bounces. If you didn't listen to that in our finals week 1 preview, basically imagine if you were able to just store a bunch of bounces, say you bounce 5 times within 15 meters and then you can run 60 more. Maybe Saad's too straightforward to test that rule though, even though he just bounces as soon as he can most of the time.
It's funny with Cottrell because when you think of forwards that create chaos, you think of 2 things: either someone who crashes pack marks, or a small guy who crumbs and kicks snaps on the run. And he's really neither of those things. But he's been a really instrumental part of what this Carlson team has done. And you look at the changes that they made to their lineup right around when they went on that tear, starting with the win over the Suns, the first win over the Suns, and bringing him in was a big part of that.
Now the question becomes, what's going to be the situation next week with Harry Mackay out? He went out concussed, and you could tell right away he was not in the right place mentally, physically, what have you, when that contact happened. It was as scary as when Daniel Rich got that knee to the head last year. It was just that sort of instant, oh, he is not right reaction.
Yeah, there was no semblance of balance whatsoever there.
It was a very quick call, as quick as the call that had been made on Libba near the end of the home and away season. There's a chance Jack Silvani is ready to go next week. I imagine you would have him in if so. Have some of the taller support, some of the ruck support as well. He'd been playing pretty well before getting injured.
I would think if not, you find a way to get Paddy Dow back involved, even if he's not a forward. You can shuffle some guys around, move someone else further forward.
If Martin is suspended, I would say Jesse Motlop into the 22, Paddy Dow as the sub is a clear solution right there.
They're really going to be fighting the urge, though.
The urge to have Paddy Dow as the sub?
Oh, no. The urge to have Ed Curnow as the sub.
Yeah. This is his last ride. He had been on the boundary for a lot of the game with his kid. It's going to be tough to leave him out, but at the same time, I would take Dow over him. And the only reason I would say to not have Dow in the 22 is that I was kind of right with saying that Sam Walsh would be playing a similar sort of game to what Dow had done in Walsh's absence from that hamstring injury. Near the end of the game, I was really frustrated with one blue and really pleased with another. Brody Kemp just kind of disconnected his controller in the goal square. Instead of rushing it through, tried to make too much happen, try to get the ball out, and it led to a Swans goal. Had it not been 5 a.m., I would have been screaming. Then at the very end of the game, though, who is it that kicks what I really saw as the game-sealing goal at the time with 5 to go? Ended up, I guess, not being the case because it did get down to within a goal at the end, but I love that it was Blake Acres, a do-it-all player for much of the year, and also that he showed up big in finals week 1 when his team that traded him away for essentially nothing is sitting at home or golfing or whatever they're doing. There was some justice in that. And as an Eagles fan, I could laugh at the Dockers for that.
I could laugh at them, and I'm kind of someone who likes Frio.
Even though they've done your team dirty, what was it, the past 3 times?
Yeah.
I don't have anything against Frio. It's just,
this was stupid, and we said it was stupid from the start, and I like being right.
If I'm correct, Frio are the only team Geelong haven't beaten in the past 2 years?
Yeah.
I think they were the only one they hadn't beaten in 2022 even.
Yeah, I didn't beat Hawthorn that year. Took care of that this year.
You know what I think? Yeah, it was Hawthorn and Frio last year then. Because they had beaten the Saints. And what was that other 2022 loss for the Cats? Because they were 18-4, right?
Yeah, it was
Sydney. Oh, yeah. Sydney round 2. Yeah, they made up for that.
Took care of that. That was handled.
But yeah, a moment for a Cats fan here to laugh at Frio.
My laughing at them has nothing to do with being a Cats fan. And just, again, I'm right.
And you were also right about the Swans honoring the Crows. I like that it was an X-score loss for both the teams that won these games, just symbolizing the issues with accuracy that ended up deciding a lot of these games.
We really should be preparing for a Sydney Collingwood semifinal this coming week.
Hey, we still have the chance for a Carlton and Collingwood grand final. I think that would be spectacular. But now, if the Blues beat Melbourne next week, the Demons will have a very, very undesirable achievement. No team has gone out in straight sets in consecutive years under the current final system, which has been in place since 1999.
Not even the Lions, even with their reputation for it.
No, because 2019 it was straight sets. 2020 they won their qualifier against Richmond. 2021 straight sets, and then last year, obviously, they made a prelim. Sam Walsh led this final with 28 disposals, including 16 contested possessions. Much more of an inside role than I necessarily expected, even with Patrick Cripps in there. Cripps seemed to be at full health, just Walsh got more of the ball. Akers kicked 1-1 from 26 and gained 570 meters. Happy for him. Happy for former Swan Newman, who had 23 disposals. And for another former Swan in there as well, George Hewitt, with his 25 and 13 contested. Just very good contested possession game all around for the Blues. You know, I'm not using they were good in the contest cliche here because this was a legitimate case. Adam Chera,
not woof,
with a goal from 24 disposals and 7 tackles. Adam Saad,
woof.
There we are, 23, 11 intercepts, 7 marks, 505 meters. How many bounces did he take? Let me check AFL tables on that one. Saad took 4.
To 4 more than Max Gunn has ever taken.
Yeah, he's had 48 bounces this year. How many bounces did he have last year?
Was it a lot?
Was it?
I don't want to be really wrong here. So you know what? I'm going to guess, going by Price is Right rules, I'm going to guess a really low number. 11.
You can add a 3 on the end of that.
All right.
Adam Saad had 113 bounces in 2022, including 15 in their round 14 loss to Richmond. That's 14 more than George Gaughan has ever had, Max's son. Patrick Cripps ended up kicking 1-1 from 21 disposals and 14 contested possessions. 1-1 from 21 was also the line for Sam Doherty. He kicked the opener. Great emotions for that. And throughout this game, from Blues players and fans alike, you could tell that they'd been waiting a long time for this. And considering they had over 92,000 there, nearly matching the Melbourne and Collingwood attendance for a game against a non-Victorian side, I was just really impressed with the crowd and the reactions throughout. And I'm looking forward to the crowd for this semifinal this coming week. I think it could be even bigger. Cottrell kicked 2-1 from 17 disposals, kind of a wild card player in a lot of respects. Blues were plus 10 in inside 50s, 56-46. And I guess that helped make up for their lack of disposal efficiency there, because they were outdone there by almost 14%. They were also minus 21 in marks, but got the intercepts when they mattered.
There was a stretch in this game, really the second quarter, where Carlton were just clearly the more dominant team. And it all kind of came in a wave then. The rest of the game, you could say, especially the second half, Sydney was superior. First quarter, Carlton was the better team, but it kind of swung back and forth. It's just the margin by which they were better in the second quarter greatly exceeded the margin by which Sydney were better in the second half. And you combine that with the Swans not kicking straight. And that's why the Blues are still playing, and why in our next episode we'll be kind of burying the Swans season.
By the way, the Blues were plus 26 in contested possessions, 161 to 135. So I was correct in that.
Jake Lloyd led the Swans with 27 disposals, 10 marks, 578 meters. Nick Blakey, 23 disposals.
His dad's now out of a job because he's not coming back to North Melbourne. So I don't know, maybe he'll join his son down at Sydney.
Benjamin's future Brownlow pick, Errol Golden, 2 goals behind, 23 disposals, 8 marks, 546 meters. Braden Campbell behind in 22 disposals, like what I saw out of him. Chad Warner behind in 22. Callum Mills behind in 21. Luke Parker, 2 goals, 19 disposals, 8 marks. Tom Papley behind 18 disposals, 10 contested possessions, and 7 clearances. Interesting.
Yeah, don't normally think of him as a big contest player or really a center square player, but worked there.
Hayden McLean, a goal behind, 17 disposals, 12 marks, and 11 hitouts. I thought he was maybe Sydney's best. And then Tom McCartan had 18 disposals, 12 intercepts, and 9 marks. My other takeaway, and again, we're going to talk a lot more about the Swans in the ensuing episode, but I just want to say real quick, unlike a lot of the other teams from outside of Victoria, they seem to have much less of an issue with getting guys to come to them. It seems like far fewer players are worried about, being far from home and going to Sydney. GWS don't have anywhere near as much of a luxury with that. And you certainly can't say that the other out-of-state teams have that luxury.
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
Welcome back. Don't forget, we are on Twitter at Americans Footy. I am on Twitter at Castle Media.
I am on Twitter at BenjaminHK01. Brian Harambe the Footy Cat is sleeping once again and is on Instagram at CatNamedGryan. Let's get back into things, talking about the Saturday finals now, with St Kilda 11-11-77 being defeated by the Greater Western Sydney Giants 15-11-101 at the G in the second elimination final. Good show out for this one. Was glad to see decent attendance there. 68,465, the Giants' largest attendance for a game that wasn't against Collingwood or Richmond.
I was a little bit late to the party with this game, coming home from high school football, but basically what I got out of it, Giants really gave it to them for a stretch in the second quarter. And then even though the Saints got it to about 3-4 goals a couple times, they could never really come all the way back to really put the fear of God into them.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints were hard enough to kill, which is kind of weird considering the role of martyrdom and canonization and all of that. But yeah, Giants were favored in this game, and they ended up winning largely in ways that we expected. Their defense held up. Sam Taylor was a massive in, obviously. Was looking at maybe a 5 to 7 week absence with his hamstring injury. But after talking with Jeremy Cameron, of all people, about working through things, that gave him good advice, and along with just the healing process going well, he was back in. And even though Max King kicked 3 goals on Taylor,
I thought the ASMR was only for injury news for him.
I didn't think so, because we did that when he was coming back, or when he kicked all of his goals on return. So I don't think so. But regardless, even though King kicked those goals against him, Taylor held up when he needed to. And overall, just a good defensive showing by the Giants. And they stayed organized even when St. Kilda pushed the pace, which they did, especially in the second half, trying to get back into things. I find it surprising, even with how this game started, that they even scored 77 points. Oh yeah, another thing that helped for the Giants, Toby Bedford being in.
Yeah, he got his suspension overturned on appeal.
Basically, it was a middle finger to the tribunal in terms of how they clearly didn't put enough weight behind the evidence from the biomechanist that the Giants brought in, as well as Zach Fisher himself, who apparently was feeling fine after the incident. So maybe that took out some of the severity of the impact. But yeah, Toby was in. David Zeta had tweeted out that Bedford had this great reaction to it, just jumping up out of his chair, and he was hoping that it had been recorded. And the Giants came through. He was all confused for a while, realizing, wait, all these words are just too much. Am I actually off? Yeah, you're free to play. Fuck yes.
Here's something I've realized. Anyone who gets off from a suspension, they end up doing something really impactful. You don't get off from a suspension and then, just have a subpar game or play like shit. You go and absolutely ball.
Yeah, and Bedford did very well. Kicked a goal from just inside 50 late in the first quarter. Had some important stoppage and contest wins. Kicked another goal in the third. Ended up going 2-2 from 16 disposals. And just having him and Brent Daniels in has done so much to open up the rest of Toby Green's game. And I hope people have realized how much both Bedford and Daniels have facilitated their captain's All-Australian captaincy. Them holding steady at half forward, their speed, their ability by both hand and foot, everything below their knees as well, has allowed Toby Green to play wherever he's needed. Thanks to all three of those smalls, along with good games from a host of other players, the Giants were more effective from clearance. It wasn't a huge margin, just raw clearance numbers, but the plays that they got off of them were better. And I guess now it's time to talk about the game that Josh Kelly had. So he was thrust into a more prominent role when Steven Canelio was ruled out after suffering an eye injury in training on Thursday. And Kelly went out and kicked 2-1 from 27 disposals, 10 scored involvements, 7 clearances, and 622 meters. So Kelly and Bedford combined for 16 clearances between themselves. It got to the point that Ross Lyon did something that he rarely ever does.
He actually implemented a tag.
Yeah, and he should have from the beginning. It should have been very obvious. No, Kelly is the one that you got to attack from the beginning. And Marcus Windhager finally got that opportunity, limited Kelly somewhat in the second half, but he'd already had a great impact by then. And he fittingly got the 10 votes toward the Gary Ayres Award.
Here's one of the really frustrating things. If you're facing the Giants, it's do you tag him? Do you tag Tom Green? Do you put a forward tag on Toby? Who would have thought at the start of the year the Giants would have been a team that would have been wait, we can only tag one guy probably.
I could understand it based on how they'd done in 2019. And the thing is, though, even we underestimated the impact of Daniels and Bedford on this team. The 35 disposals and 705 meters gained from Tom Green may have warranted a tag as well, but Kelly was the right decision. It just should have happened a lot sooner. And maybe then we could have been talking about a closer game instead of wondering whether the Saints are truly one of the 8 best teams.
That's going to be a fun subject of debate again in our next episode when we put an end to our Saints and Swans discussions and move on to previewing semifinals, which, again, we would call quarterfinals.
Yeah, we agree with Barish on that front. The Giants in the first quarter exceeded their total score from their previous final at the G. They kicked 5-3 in the first quarter and only managed 25 points in the 2019 grand final, despite, I believe, kicking the first goal.
Yeah, they definitely kicked the first goal. Remember, there was a whole string of grand final losers kicking the opening goal.
Was it Geelong who broke that, or was it Melbourne?
I think it was Melbourne. Let me check. Yeah, it was Melbourne. It was Petrarca.
Yeah, makes sense. Start of his Norm Smith effort.
So yes, the last 2 grand finals have both been won by the team that kicked the first goal.
Other things here, there were some big emotions surrounding Dan Boyd's goal in this game, and makes sense. A player who's really admired on that Giants list had to fight really hard to get back into the league after not getting a game with the Bulldogs on their scholarship. Next week will be his 100th game. Thrilled that he's getting to that milestone. On the younger side, it's Finn Callahan that continues to impress me, going from the halfback to the wing. Just such a sure player already. Rarely makes poor decisions and lightning fast as well. Had a big impact on a few of the rebounds and is quickly cementing himself as a key player in this Giants group. Also, congratulations to Greater Western Sydney on setting a record that in some ways is desirable and in some ways isn't. They have won at 11 different venues this season.
I don't think that's undesirable at all. I think that's fucking awesome.
I think it's undesirable that they've had to travel so much and as a result have been at so many alternate venues.
I think it's great, especially because you can realize that, like, for example, Collingwood could never do that. Richmond as well.
But yeah, they won games at Giants Stadium, Norwood Oval, SCG, Cardinia Park, Blundstone Arena, Traeger Park, Adelaide Oval, Monica Oval, Mars Stadium, Marvel Stadium, and the G. So the only state or territory in which they did not win a game this year?
Western Australia.
They lost to the Eagles round 2.
Filling out the GWS stats, Lockie Ash, 31 disposals, 9 marks, 588 meters. Lockie Whitfield, 31 disposals, 518 meters.
He was kind of victimized a few times in the air by Cooper Sharman, but steadily won on the ground. I thought that the Saints would have been able to exploit that matchup with Sharman a little bit more, but they just couldn't have nearly as effective entries.
Kieran Briggs, a behind, 28 hit outs, 17 disposals, 15 contested possessions, 9 clearances. Connor Eiton, 11 intercepts. Giants were more efficient inside 50 by just a hair over 14%. Again, that's the efficiency stat that matters.
Yeah, the Saints are last in the AFL for inside 50s to scores. That ratio had been a real talking point, sticking point for them throughout the home and away season, and that definitely manifested itself again.
On the hit-out numbers, I find it really interesting that, like, without Paddy Ryder, this new version of Rowan Marshall, he just doesn't win a lot of hit-outs, but does everything else, and it's totally okay.
Yeah,
He's a really interesting player and a fun study.
So the question is, do you get that support for him or do you not? Does Jack Hayes have a more prominent role to play next year? Marshall with a goal, 31 disposals, 22 contested possessions, 18 hitouts, all 18 of the Saints hitouts, 9 clearances and 506 meters, a do-it-all player who happens to be cast as a ruck.
I wonder what would happen if he was in, like, a more Mark Blitzov's type role. Could he do that stuff effectively?
Maybe having another ruck in there could allow for that, so maybe that is a spot for Hayes to be more prominent. I'm not sure if Ross Lyon would be the type to take that gamble, though. But if you want to see what that's like, Rowan, why don't you consider going down the highway? Why not try a holiday in Geelong next year?
A second Blitzovs would be, like, terrifying for opponents.
And hopefully Blitzovs can return to more of that role next year between steadier health for the whole list and the emergence of Toby Conway for the Cats. As we touched on with both the Round 24 recap and our So You Didn't Crack the 8 episodes. Again, if your team didn't play finals, we did postmortems on the 10 non-finalist clubs already, so go back and look at those 2 recent episodes for that. Jack Steele led the final with 38 disposals and 8 clearances. Brad Hill kicked 2-1 from 29 and gained 560 meters returned to more of that outside role, whereas he played inside in their home and away matchup. Jack Sinclair, 25 disposals at 493 meters. Seb Ross behind from 24. Isaiah Mightini-Milrow, one of the most accurate kicks, and could be argued to be one of the top 10 players on the Saints list already, and one of the top pieces from his draft class already. A goal from 23 disposals at 523 meters. Looking forward to his continued maturation at AFL level. Brad Crouch behind from 21. Josh What's a Battle with 18 disposals and 8 marks. Jade Gresham, we'll see what his future is, 17 at 7 tackles. And I mentioned Cooper Sharman got the better of Whitfield in terms of marking. He kicked 2-1 from 16 disposals and 11 contested possessions. He had a really nice mark in there at one point as well. I think it was actually for the first goal where he had this tough pack mark that, if they had mark of the round for the finals weeks, you could definitely see that be right up there.
Brisbane 19-9, 123, defeating Port Adelaide 11-9, 75. I know this game got out of hand in the second half, but this was the most fun final in that it felt like a final, fast-paced, high-octane, good action, even if there were some pretty bad set shot misses, including some from some very unlikely candidates. This was the one game that really felt like September footy's supposed to feel.
Until Port got ravaged by injuries, I'd say.
And even then, it felt like Brisbane were going to pull away, but basically, Lions led by 11 after a quarter where Port kicked 1-4. Todd Marshall had a really bad night. 16-point lead at half. Scored 3 straight in the third to go up by 28. Port got it back down to 16, and then the Lions ran away with it. And it was right after a really tough sequence of events for Port. They file a sub paperwork, and then, as that happens, they've got Dylan Williams coming to the bench, grabbing his hamstring, and Trent McKenzie hurt his ankle as Cam Rayner crashed a pack.
But too late. Travis Boak had already come in for Darcy Burton-Jones.
And frankly, even if that sub hadn't been made, and even if they were playing, with 21 men instead of 20, or even if that hadn't happened, I think Brisbane were in position to pull away. It was a big night for Joe Danaher.
5 for him. But that didn't cause the most fun singing of the night.
I know. So here's the thing. A lot of people get mad about goal music, including people that aren't the old crusty, do everything the same way forever type.
These aren't old men yelling at clouds.
Correct. They are not crackpots.
And their son is not a porn star or whatever. So those 2 consecutive Charlie Cameron goals that sent the Gabba into a frenzy were back-to-back goals a little bit before that Port injury fiasco happened. They started singing John Denver, and then center clearance. Cameron gets the handball on the overlap. They aren't even done singing, and they got to start cheering and singing it again.
I really like this. I like that the sing-along, continues after the music stops. And again, it's really funny that a song that's about placed pretty much halfway around the world. By the way, it's not the state of West Virginia. It's the western part of the state of Virginia.
Beautiful area of the United States, regardless of which it actually is.
Too damn humid, but that's a lot of the country.
I mean, it's a lot of the eastern seaboard. If you could get over that, though, yeah, Appalachia's really pretty.
I like the stretch between western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee from my recent travels there. Asheville, North Carolina is awesome, and everyone should visit there.
Is that also the one with the minor league ballpark that held a NASCAR race?
I don't know. I just know it's a 100-year-old stadium that's about to undergo some major renovations. So I'm glad that I was able to see it before that, and I'm sure I would enjoy also seeing it after that.
Yup, 1956, McCormick Field hosted a stock car race.
I guess it must have been on the upper part of the footprint of the place, because there's no way they could do anything with it with how small the current setup is. It must have been a totally different setup. Anyway, that's the song is about that part of the country. I thought it was a really fun moment.
I think we're just more okay with that sort of thing. We're more used to it because of hockey goal songs.
Well, here's the thing. Hockey goal songs, I'm not a big fan of. Having songs for each player, especially because sometimes, you can't tell, oh, did it get tipped? I don't know. Whereas with footy, there's really maybe 1 or 2 goals all season where you're not sure who it gets credited to. The hockey version of this that I like is goal, you have the normal team goal song, and then during the next stoppage of play, they play the individual player song. That's how I would do it.
Have any teams actually done that or no?
I think that's happened a couple times because like
If it's like a star player.
no, or if they didn't know who scored it the first time. Because, yeah, again, a lot of times you don't know who's going to get credit with a goal even after it's been scored.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about Australian football.
I'd say soccer, generally, you can do that as well.
I mean, most codes of football, it's pretty damn clear.
You know what? I think every NFL team, like every NFL player should have a touchdown song, and that even like the offensive lineman, and then when one of them falls on a fumble in the end zone, you finally get to play it. I think that would be great.
The offensive line will just have like the most meme picks ever then.
Oh yeah, it would be fun. Definitely need, someone's left guard, if they ever fall on a fumble for a touchdown, to start playing Numa Numa, or as the full song is known, Dragostadin Tang. It's like the only Moldovan words anyone will ever know.
Yeah, especially because the Sunstroke Project sing in English.
But yeah, Brisbane pulled away. It was mostly the usual suspects, although Lachie Neale was held below 20 disposals. Hugh McCluggage actually led the way for them with 26 of them. 12 score involvements, 9 clearances, and a goal.
10 votes pretty easy for him. Yeah, Lachie Neale tagged a lot of the way. Willem Drew, among others, playing him closely. That is a role that makes sense, and Drew did well for his efforts, getting 20 disposals, 13 contested possessions, and 8 clearances.
I liked how the Lions, kind of even with Neale being tagged, what they would do is they'd have someone like towards the wing in open space and they'd swing it to him. And then that guy would center it or find someone along the boundary, usually center it.
And that's a great role for McCluggage to be able to play, that sort of next outside guy where we don't really think of him as a true wing, but he's been cast in that role a lot for Brisbane.
Yeah, it's sort of like trying to think of like a way for people to visualize this. I don't know. It's, you have like kicks going forward straight from one end to the other, and then you swing it out to the right at like a 45-degree angle. And then from there, you work it back into the middle. I think that's the best way to describe it. And yeah, they used that really effectively all night. Biggest positive for Port Adelaide, no question, Ollie Lord with his 4-goal performance. He was someone who could kick straight on a night where Todd Marshall had some inexplicably awful misses. I think of Marshall as a very good set shot and one of the best contested marks. So weird night for him. But Lord not only kicked the 4, he was matched up against Harris Andrews and kind of kicked his ass. And yet the Lions still won this game by 48.
Ollie Lord against Sam Taylor could happen next week. I feel like there could be a world where even after kicking 4 goals, Lord might not get that main assignment because of Marshall, because of Finlayson, because of Charlie Dixon coming back in. I think he's got to stay in, though. I mean, he kicked forward also with the injuries that Port have. They'll need to recast their defense. With McKenzie maybe being an issue, I would say slide Ryan Burton back, give him a steadier job in defense. I would hope that Darcy Byrne-Jones stays in the 22 at that pressure forward spot where he usually does well, but I guess it depends on how compromised they end up being with if McKenzie's able to go or not.
Yeah, I thought McKenzie was not particularly good in this game.
I guess we'll also see then what the status is on Tom Jonas. Thinking about Jonas missed this game with a calf injury. So the Brisbane Lions obviously have been building up to this for a few years now. It's Chris Fagan's 7th year. It's their 5th straight year making finals. They, in fact, are the only club to have made each of the past 5 final series. And that's despite claiming the spoon in 2017 and finishing 15th in 2018. But I think some of the greatest excitement from this game came from one of their newest pieces, that being Jasper Fletcher, pick 12 from this past draft. And we talk about how sound of a player Will Ashcroft is. He fits into that midfield so seamlessly, and maybe that's why he isn't as noticeable at times when he makes the excellent plays that he does. Jasper Fletcher is that flashy type of good.
He was really sharp in this game.
Fletcher kicking 3 straight from 16 disposals. It's going to be scary seeing both him and Ashcroft running around in maroon, blue, and gold for the next decade plus. And yeah, the Lions' depth in the midfield is fine. Being able to make up for Neale, Ashcroft not being in there, that was never a problem for them. The issue would be if Andrews gets victimized again, and if Jack Payne maybe doesn't have as strong of a one-on-one performance when they play either the Blues or Demons in 2 weeks' time. I would say maybe in terms of defense then that would the Blues actually be a tougher matchup?
I think the Demons would test their depth more, the Blues would test their top guys more. But as we saw in this game, Brisbane can survive even with an off game from Harris Anderson. Now, that said, Jack Payne was quite good. Ryan Lester was solid as well. But yeah, there is a path.
Now, Charlie Curnow only kicked 1 goal against Brisbane in round 9, and I think that was when he was not matched up against Payne. So this year has really been a coming out party for Jack Payne in so many respects defensively. For some reason, I always thought that he was older than he is. He's only 23.
Maybe just because he's a big dude.
Yeah, he's, 6'5" or 6'6"? He's 197 centimeters and 101 kilos, so that puts him around 220 pounds. That's like some tight end size right there.
I'm just really looking forward to this Port Adelaide GWS matchup, especially the likely Todd Marshall versus Sam Taylor one-on-one. I think that's the best example of, unstoppable force and movable object. Now, I've got one more question before we really finish wrapping this game up.
You want gravy on that cellar door?
No. I was going to ask, do you like that this week we'll have a semifinal between 2 teams from outside of Victoria and one between the 2 teams within it? Then the week after, you're going to have Victoria versus non-Victoria in each prelim. Do you like that, or would you rather it be like an all-Victorian prelim and an all-out-of-state prelim?
I don't really mind it one way or the other as long as we get quality games, honestly. You know that tickets will sell well regardless. You know that the atmosphere will be good. It's not a huge concern for me.
I think it's an interesting thing.
Josh Dunkley had 21 disposals and 7 tackles. His work with Cam Rayner was excellent. Rayner fed him for a few 1-2s, and they pretty much always worked into a goal. It was another one of Rayner's best games. It amazes me that he's been as productive as he is, despite being cast as a defender to start the year. Really, since Holy Thursday, Chris Fagan learned his lesson and has kept him forward since. And I think he's now got 23 goals after kicking 3 more there on Saturday. Joe Danaher kicked 5-1 from his 16 disposals with 11 contested possessions. No shocking miss or anything to my recollection. And one of the goals was just like a nice turning bouncy kick where he could have gone to Eric Hipwood to the side of him, but backed himself in.
Considering how Hipwood kicked, he had some struggles. That was probably for the best.
And again, it's a rare game where one of the 2 of them isn't on in terms of their accuracy. And unlike last year, you know that they'll both be playing in their second final, because Joe Danaher's daughter is now just about 1. In defense, Brandon Starcevich had 15 disposals, 10 intercepts, and 7 marks. Ryan Lester with 13 and 7 marks for him as well. The defensive depth should be able to carry them a decent amount, even if one of their top guys has an off game. So I could see them winning their prelim by a decent margin, kind of like they did here, but without injuries impacting things so much.
Lions with 16 more inside 50s, 26 more marks, 104-78. Port did lay 17 more tackles. The main guys did their thing for Port. Just wasn't a lot in the way of depth contributions. Zach Butters, 29 disposals, 7 tackles, 599 meters. By the way, he was also, the coach's MVP for the year. I'm looking through the votes. There was the Sydney-Melbourne game in round 24 was almost a perfect game. It was a 10-8, 5-5-2. Connor Rosie, a goal, 28 disposals, 8 clearances, 607 meters. Dan Houston, 27 disposals. Gotta be frustrating when you have Butters and Rosie both clicking. You still kind of get your clocks cleaned. Sam Powell-Pepper, 2-2 from 19 disposals, 11 contested possessions. Miles Bergman, only 13 disposals, 7 marks, though. Quiet game for Jason Horn-Francis, thinking of Miles Bergman that he's to come up with. And Scott Lysette, I know, Benjamin, you had some interesting takes about his performance I'd love to hear more about, but he had a behind from 38 hitouts, 11 disposals, and 9 tackles.
I want to believe in Lysette, but he's so up and down and is often less functional on other parts of the oval. The 9 tackles is what impressed me the most out of this showing. I still, though, for some reason, something's telling me that going deeper into September, I would back in Mason Cox ahead of him. Maybe it's just my Americanness. Maybe it's my belief in September Mason. But I think when push comes to shove, I'd rather have Mason in there, as weird as that may be. Finals Week 1 saw a new record for a Finals Week attendance with 289,147 fans, beating the record from 2018 by a hair under 6,000. 3 games at the G, obviously being the catalyst for that. You said your piece about the matchups already. if we have to pick like a play of the round, is there any one thing that really stands out to you? And I'm not talking about a suspension-causing play. I mean, that Sharman Hager was nice. That Zach Bailey opening goal along the boundary was a big one. The league really promoted that one on their socials.
Yeah, I thought that was good, not great. I don't think there was really one that like jumped out to me.
Yeah, I think it's one of those two, though. So maybe those would be your mark and goal of the round, respectively. Although Ollie Lord's turning snap goal was not bad either, especially for a tall guy. Main character for Week 1 of finals, pretty damn obvious, yeah?
Yeah, it's got to be Braden Maynard. That's kind of a no-brainer.
No Brainard, really?
I wasn't even trying to make a joke there. I said no-brainer.
Well, maybe Collingwood will be no Brainard. Could be that way for the rest of the season. And into next. We'll have to see with the tribunal. This episode will be out ahead of that, though, so you'll be able to catch our thoughts on how the tribunal is still deliberating, and just marveling at the resolve of David Zita and everybody else covering those things on Twitter at Americans Footy. We are also on YouTube under that same handle. I am on Twitter at BenjaminHK01.
I'm on Twitter at Castle Media. Brian Harambe was just twitching in his sleep, which is really cute.
And he is again.
Instagram at Cat Named Brian.
We're going to let him just keep on dreaming.